Hurricane Milton, which has brought tornadoes, floods and the risk of storm surges after making landfall in Florida. Let's take you to some of the live images coming into us. And flooding, this is one of the big issues that we've just been hearing about in a news conference led by Florida Governor Ron DeSantis and representatives of a number of emergency response agencies. Warnings for people not to go near these areas of flooding if they possibly can because of downed power lines potentially concealed under the water. We know that a number of search and rescue teams are working both underwater and on land. The State Guard and the National Guard in operation in Florida as well, and a number of families rescued overnight. But we have heard about a number of deaths, 4 people killed in a mobile home park in the St Lucie area of Florida. We heard that really remarkable statistic that 12 tornadoes had come through in as little as 20 minutes in that area. So a huge impact from Hurricane Milton there. We had those warnings that the tornadoes would come with the hurricanes. This is Tampa, which escaped the eye of the storm, but clearly the whole of the state affected. You can see some heavy surface water, some flooding there as well. And I think we can bring you to Orlando as well. These are the images of flooding that we've been seeing in particular there in Orlando, and a process of damage assessment going on there as elsewhere in the state. This is Fort Myers. This is actually where Milton made landfall. You can see some evidence of surface water there. So although the hurricane has now passed over the state, the process of picking up and trying to assess the damage, rescue people, help people to start to rebuild from the damage that has been done begins. And of course, it's only 2 weeks since Hurricane Helene, so really there hadn't been a chance to recover from that. We've seen our correspondents out in various parts of Florida showing us the debris from Helene that still hasn't been dealt with because of course the state was then very much preparing for Milton, which at one point, let me remind you, was a Category 5 hurricane. That is the highest classification of hurricane, but was downgraded. So thankfully, not the worst case scenario. That was probably the key line from Governor DeSantis, but still very significant damage caused and a huge operation. If you saw the briefing from the governor a few minutes ago here on BBC News, he was giving out various pieces of advice where people could access help and funding to try to rebuild. Well, let's get an update on the picture there in Florida with this report from Alison Freeman.
The full power of the wind on display. In St Petersburg, this crane had crashed to the ground as Hurricane Milton swept through Florida. It also ripped the roof off this baseball stadium, which had been set up to house thousands of emergency responders. The hurricane was a Category 3 when it made landfall, hitting the west coast with its full force, bringing deadly tornadoes. In St Lucie on the east coast, there was devastating damage, with a number of people killed.
We're focusing on just recovering, getting help to people that need it. Again, this community was hit from what the Dopplers are showing. We got hit the hardest, the quickest.
In Fort Myers, buildings were destroyed in seconds.
These windows blew out. I was about probably right here when it happened. My cat over there on the desk. I grabbed the 2 dogs and run under my bed. But that was it. Probably 1 minute total.
Strong winds and heavy rain swept across Florida. The number of people left without power reported to be more than 3 million.
There's still some power over there, but we've seen a substation over there just basically blow blue and green. It's been crazy.
Those who hadn't evacuated were told to hunker down. Emergency services said it was too dangerous to respond to calls, and holidaymakers were moved to safe locations in tourist destinations like Orlando.
It's what happens when you come to Florida in hurricane season, I guess. We're currently on the 10th floor at the moment. We can't feel any wind, but we can certainly see it coming up the look at the wind does.
Even after the hurricane passes through, people are being warned that the threat still continues, with reports now of dangerous flooding caused by the storm surge, rising waters pushed inland by the wind. Alison Freeman, BBC News.
And I was mentioning that press briefing from Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. Here's a little more of what he said.
We had over 80,000 people that were into shelters overnight as the storm hit the state. We will better understand the extent of the damage as the day progresses. And you have people that are out there assessing damage right now. First responders have been working all through the night to help people who were in distress. And what we can say is the storm was significant, but thankfully this was not the worst case scenario. The storm did weaken before landfall, and the storm surge, as initially reported, has not been as significant overall as what was observed for Hurricane Helene. Right now, it looks like Sarasota County had the most significant storm surge, likely somewhere between 8 to 10 feet. And remember, with Helene, we had 15 to 20 feet up in Taylor County.
Ron DeSantis, and just a quick glimpse again at those pictures coming to us from Orlando. Some sense of the flooding there, but early days yet in terms of gathering pictures in Florida and fully assessing the damage and indeed the loss of life. It is feared there will be more than those 4 deaths reported after a number of tornadoes went through one part of the state in the space of just 20 minutes.